الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our lessons on atheism and Islam, a critical response, we move on to a next discussion that some atheists or non-religious people present, and that's a discussion or argument about religion and violence. And what the atheist or the non-religious person will try to do is suggest that religion is a cause for violence, and it's inherently violent, and therefore it is not good. Belief in religion, whatever religion, is problematic because of its what they argue, preponderance, or that leads to violence. And we're going to address this. It's an emotional argument, as you can probably tell. And it's important to understand this because people who make this argument are going to make it a certain way. And there's different ways of trying to make the argument, but the point is they're going to try to rely on either, number one, history. So they're going to try to manipulate history and say that there's historical evidence of wars caused by religion. They will also try to use religious texts out of place. So they'll do is they'll cherry pick certain verses, right? So quote mine certain verses outside their context in order to create an impression that religion, whether it be Islam, Christianity, Judaism, doesn't matter. It's innately violent. And for the people giving da'wah, they should know this. These are techniques of the people of batil, the people of falsehood, that they read the Quran and the Sunnah outside of its proper understanding. So for example, they'll bring you Surah Tawbah, right, and ayah number 4, or number 5. So they bring ayah number 5 in Surah Tawbah as evidence, فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم. So whenever the sacred months are passed, and kill the polytheists wherever you find them. So we as Muslims, we know this is taken out of context, right? Mushrikeen منهم, right? So they're going to make ta'amim. Alif Lam here is what? Istighraq or lil-ahd. That's what we're going to ask. They don't know anything. They just say, oh, it says in the translation, kill them where you find them. Who's them? Quraysh. What's this surah about? Asbab al-Nuzul. That's the academic response. The Ami person, he's gonna, as if he never read that verse, because he doesn't understand why they're doing this. So we need to understand what's the connection here. I don't see the connection between these verses and violence. What is going on here? We have to put the surah together. So as Muslims, we have to know this is what they're going to try to do, using history, or they try to quote mine verses, whether it be Quran, Old Testament, New Testament, and try to make a case that religion is cause of all wars. So Dr. Abdul in his response to atheism, he has a long chapter. We're going to pretty much read most from there, and some other benefits I'll add, as to how to deal with it. But we must start off with the history, a bit about history. Where did this come from? It's an emotional argument. It's not an academic one. So truth be told, if an atheist is resorting, or non-religious person resorting to this kind of argument, you already know that they have nothing. Because the arguments we covered last couple of weeks, those are their strongest arguments, or their leading arguments. And those are between empirical, or we said logical, and or evidential arguments. These are the ones they're going to present. This one is an emotional one. But where does it come from? So Dr. Abdullah, he mentioned historically, if you go back to history, and we have to start there, this critique of religion, specifically the church, it emerged in the Middle Ages. And it emerged in a time period where Europe was going through political and religious reform. And therefore, there was lots of critique of the church, specifically Catholic Church, and their corruption and tyranny and political abuse. And we have to know that anyone who studies history will know this. The Catholic Church, how it took advantage of people in terms of high exorbitant prices, taxes, indulgences, right? Paying for confessions and repentance. You can research it. The Protestant Reformation, 15th, 16th century, it caused So it's important to have that knowledge because this is a big event. The corruption, the Catholic Church led people to think that, well, if the people of God, the men of God, suppose they're doing corruption. You see, this is so who's amongst the earliest he mentions who had this critique? Because they associated the behavior to the religion was Machiavelli. He mentions, like Niccolo Machiavelli, he wrote, one of his works was published after his death, because he's most famous for the book The Prince, right? But he has other works, and he's a philosopher as well as a political statesman, and pretty much, right, most of the cunning tactics people dare attribute to him. If you read his book, right? But in there, he has a critique, and from the critique he says, right, it's a long quote, but the summary of it is that he says, we Italians, because he's Italian, owe the Church, Catholic Church, and its clergy this first debt, that through them we have become wicked and irreligious. So he's saying that the corruption in Italian people, society and people, even the fact they became bad Christians, is because of the Catholic Church and their abuse. And he mentions now, if you look at other countries at that time, France and Spain, who've moved from the church towards states and princes, whereas Italy, the home of the Vatican, it still pretty much was a Christian state and the church was powerful. So much so, if you study history, you know, even Mussolini couldn't get rid of the Catholic Church. And he's the biggest atheist you're going to get because it's too politically powerful. So what happened then was that he says that things are going downhill for Italy is because of this. And again, this is published after his death in work. But he's not the only one, but you can say he's amongst the earliest of those who make those critiques. And he dies 1527. So this shows you this argument's old. And later, it was carried on by the French philosopher Voltaire, who wrote his philosophical encyclopedia in 1764, in which he strongly criticized Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. At least many of us might not know him, the Enlightenment writer, French philosopher Voltaire. Right? He said bad things about Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Islam. So this person is not worth our attention, but we have to know he started with the critique of all the religions. And one of his doubts in his encyclopedia was the suspicion or doubt of the evils resulting from the existence of religion, i.e. violence that comes from them. And again, like Abdul says, accusing religion of being a cause of violence became a common trend amongst atheists and non-religious people after this. And the revolutionaries of the French Revolution were influenced by Voltaire's philosophy and harsh criticism of Christianity. So much so that after the French Revolution, the French tried to adopt, for the first time, an atheist state. And you have to Google that, right? After the French Revolution, France became an atheist state. They tried to get rid of the church entirely. And it didn't last long, obviously. Right? After the emergence of Napoleon, right? Things went the other way. But you get the point. Right? So it's important to see how old this argument is, right? So Machiavelli, Voltaire, and it keeps going. And it just continues until our era, and it was revived by the new atheists using September 11th and the terrorist attacks as a way to show that Islam, more specifically, because again, new atheism, what makes them new? They are a critique of Islam. They focus on Islam. Even though atheism is old, it critiques all religion, but what makes the new atheism new is their specific focus on Islam despite not knowing much about it. As we'll see, they group all religions together because they believe that whatever is good for or valid for Christianity should flow. Right? But this is where the idea comes. So you can see now, post 9/11, the war on terror, now people will become heightened, right, to the idea that whoever did it, again, the face of it, the terrorists, the Khawarij, those who associate with it, well, those are people of religion. So therefore, it must be true. طيب, now that we've understood a little bit about that, then we can find in the works of new atheists. So for example, Sam Harris, like Abdullah quotes Sam Harris in his book, The End of Faith, Religion, Terror, and Future of Reason, page 2004. Chapter 3 was devoted to this discussion. So these new atheists, each one has a book, right? The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins, The End of Faith, Sam Harris, God is Not Great, Hitchens. Each of these guys wrote their book. These are like, you could say, their Bibles. I think because they don't have a Bible, right? One guy wrote one for them too. Right? You have to know that, right? For everything they don't have to have because they're religion, right? But this is the books that they have. So this chapter 3 of Sam Harris's book, he has a chapter about the evil of religion. Amongst them, when he mentions the violence, in chapter 4 he mentions the problem of Islam and terrorism. Again, creating the association of violence and religion. Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion, page printed 2006. Chapter 7, he discusses the Christian's Bible encouraging for evil and violence. Right? And chapter 8, he also has what's the problem with religions and why are they so aggressive. And Shaykh Abdullah says he has 30 pages listing evils resulting from religion, in his opinion, and focusing on violence in the name of God. So we have to understand what the argument is. People of faith who are fighting are using religion as the name for their violence. So therefore the argument goes that the violence must be innately associated or caused by religion. Again, it's a faulty argument, but this is what they're saying. Because if religious people are saying in the name of God, I'm going to kill somebody, then religion is the problem. And we can also see, right, Christopher Hitchens in 2007, he wrote a book, God is Not Great. Right, look at the title, guys. Right, we say Allahu Akbar, he wrote this book, God is Not Great. These are the kind of people. Allah, He punished them. Right? These people, they're humiliated right now. Their legacy is done. But this is the kind of people that were there. And in there, he says why religion poisons everything. And again, Hitchens is not even, he's just a journalist, right? But he has the worst tongue of all of them because he's the way he writes. And he has a whole discussion about this, and he makes all these kind of wild claims. Right? Chapter 2, religion kills. So clearly, new atheists, they use this emotional doubt, Dr. Abdullah says, this emotional doubt to spread it to the awam, the masses. Because awam, the lay people, are more emotional than logical, right? If you tell them, this person is trying to kill you and this is what they believe, people are going to believe it. The other arguments we presented before are more sophisticated, but that's not necessarily going to be effective. So now we can see how prevalent this is. And then he brings a long discussion, Shaykh Abdullah, about different philosophers who also discuss this issue. Right? So it's not like only they're doing it, others have taken on the issue as well by trying to figure out what does religion have to do with terrorism, sectarian violence, etc. And when they say religion, they mean all religions, so they're not exempting anybody. Once we understand this argument can be used in line with the problem of evil, or it can be used separately. Right? So if you won't put it in logical terms, Dr. Abdullah says if you want to put a logical argument, it's as follows. Belief in God causes evil. God is an evil, or religion is an evil thing. And number 3, what is objectively wrong is condemned by the objectively wrong God. And therefore, if you keep going down there, things that therefore theism is a void of religion, void of God, void of good. Again, it's not the best argument, but it's a long argument trying to say that God allowed this, therefore God is a problem, therefore the people who believe in Him is a problem, therefore the whole religion is a problem. But if you look carefully, you notice that it's full of assumptions, right? All of this is full of assumptions. Amongst many of which is that they focus on violence and from people of religion as if violence is unique to people of religion. Right? We have already a problem here. Violence is innate to humans. Mankind, they do violence, not religious people only. As we'll see, the atheists, they also have their history. So when we look at this argument, we must understand what they will try to do. The first, what they'll try to do is they'll try to bring historical evidence. And number 2, what they'll do is they'll try to misquote the religious texts. So we can take a look at it 2 ways. First, we can look at it broadly, then more specifically Islamically. Because we're Muslims, we're going to defend Islam. And we're going to say that Islam has nothing to do with this claim. So if we look at from a logical perspective, the claim itself is not correct. And Dr. Abdullah, he brings a lot of evidences to show different examples of history, or the fact that, logically speaking, there is no connection between the two. So if you were to answer this question simply, the question is going to be, there's no logical talazum, logical necessity between violence and religion. Because violence is not exclusive to people of religion. It's mankind, they fight because they differ over different things. From those things they differ over is land, politics, money, religion. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. People always differ. خلاص. Allah says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ جَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً مَا كَانَ لِمَنْ أُمَّةٍ لَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. They're always going to be different. They're always going to be different. That's it. That's mankind. So if mankind is different, خلاص. We're going to differ over this, we're going to differ over that. And every difference might produce a different result. So we must understand, firstly, it's not a religion that's the problem. It's the nature of man, the good, bad of them, or those who have transgressed their boundaries, they're the ones who do violence. But to say it's connected to religion is to assume a false cause. It's a false cause, right? Because what you've done is attributed the violence that comes from religious people to the religion, but not to the bad person. Right? Because there's a difference between violence and terrorism, right? And what they will say, just war or self-defense, etc. So people do understand there's times where you have to use violence to protect yourself. What they're saying is when people are killing innocent people. So we're going to ask, is there a connection innately, i.e. a logical necessity, between people's violence and the religion? Hence that if every time you find religious people you find violence, or is it that every time you find humans you find violence? Right? It's the latter, right? Human beings, they fight. And therefore they transgress the bounds. If they do it wrongly, wrong. If they've just caused just. So hence, no one's going to deny the fact that there can be such thing as the use of force. Because if they go there, then they're going to implicate themselves. As we'll see quickly, right? The atheists and the other non-religious states have a lot of blood on their hands. But the argument is that religious people have a propensity to fight and kill. So we're going to respond by saying this is not correct. This is not correct. Because Allah tells us in the Quran, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ, if Allah wanted, or your Lord wanted, لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا, He'll make the ummah all one, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. Mankind will never cease to differ. So therefore, from the nature of man is differing, and different that leads to fighting. So that's one. Chapter Surah Hud, ayah 118. The second thing we need to take a look at is what Abdul mentions, that the connection between religion and violence. Is it a necessary cause, a sufficient cause, or is it plural causes? Now we have to ask the question about the asbab. Okay, so this is a logical response. For the first one we said, it's the fallacy of the false cause. We're attributing the violence to the wrong source. It should be mankind, not all of them, but many of them, they resort to violence. And the proof of it, the two sons of Adam, first human beings. And what were they fighting over? Wasn't religion, right? Okay, that's the first, the murders. It had to do with jealousy and things like this. So therefore we start from there. But now we have to go to the nature of the cause. What kind of cause is it? So we have three types of causes then. We have necessary causes, right? We have sufficient causes, and what we call sole causes or single causes. So it's important to understand these terminologies. A necessary cause is a condition that must be present for an event to happen. And we talked about last week, but we have to bring it again. Necessary cause. Necessary cause means when something needs to be there for something else to happen. But by itself, it doesn't make something happen. Means in order for someone to say that religious people cause violence, we need for first to have violence and religious people. But if we argue that if we have religious people have violence, no. We're going to say no. It's a necessary cause, means it's there when religious violence happens, but we have a second one, which is called a sufficient cause. It's an important sufficient cause. What does that mean? That means this one is necessary, and without it, the outcome cannot happen. It cannot happen at all. So we have to then understand what the atheist is doing. Is he making the claim that religion is a necessary cause or a sufficient cause? So necessary cause means anytime there's a religious violence, obviously the person is religious because it's called religious violence. But not every time there's violence is a religious person. Or another way to understand it, not every time there's terrorism, it has nothing to do with Islam. Terrorism has to do with politics. Right? You can research that. The best expert in the world is that terrorism is using violence for political gain. But what's the easiest way to galvanize people behind that? Religion. Right? So we have to be careful of this. So the question is, if religious belief is a necessary cause of religious violence, then religious evil cannot occur without religious belief. However, the fact is that evil is committed in the name of God does not mean that religious belief was behind it. So as many researchers have noted, therefore religious belief cannot be a necessary cause. So there's the first problem. We're not even going to agree that religion is a necessary cause. We're going to say that religious belief leads to religious violence. But religious people do things for other than religion. To make it easy, think about the Khawarij. The Khawarij say, for the name of Allah, we're going to kill Muslims who believe in Allah. Khawarij, what are the Prophet themselves of the Khawarij? The religious people, right? يَقَتُلُونَ أَهْلَ الْإِسْلَامِ. They're going to kill the people of Islam, other Muslims. So if their Aqidah led them to killing them, not the fact that they're religious, because if religious beliefs have to lead to violence, we're going to argue the people who violated religious belief are the Khawarij, hence they kill Muslims. Otherwise, religious belief says you can't kill Muslims. So the first response, violence and religion is not a necessary cause nor a sufficient cause. It's neither. And also, it's not a sole cause. All of them it's not. It's a correlated cause. You can say it's correlated, not causation. Khalas. Correlation is not causation. Every one of us who study university knows that. What does that mean? There's a correlation between theft and ice cream. You can research that. What does that tell me? That doesn't tell me anything, right? I'm going to say, subhanAllah. The weather goes up, ice cream goes up, yes, and therefore people have more money, they get robbed. That's what the studies show. But it doesn't tell us now that ice cream sales predict violence. Correlation is not causation. So we're going to ask you, a religious person who kills someone, what does that have to do with his deed? How pious is he that he killed somebody else for no reason? It's already a bad argument. If you tell me he's a Muslim who killed an innocent person, he's not practicing Muslim. Khalas. Islam, we call that person either a fasiq or he's an extremist. He's not a good Muslim. But here they are come and say that's Islam. Then if that's the case, then the best Muslims should have done it. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what Aisha say, he never hit anyone with his hand except in battle. Make it make sense. Come on. When I'm born yesterday, you want to quote somebody else. When it comes to Islam, you better watch your words. Our religion is firmly documented. That's why we're going to come to Islam in a second. But you see the problem. Causation is wrong. It's more correlation. Otherwise, it's not a necessary cause, not a sufficient cause, not even a sole cause. Because we have violence in other than religion, which leads to the next point. If we were to take their point, because when it comes to argumentation, you can either do many methods, and this is what ulama talk about when it comes to the art of argumentation. You can respond to them by just attacking the premise, or you can go other ways, right? Let's steel man them for a second. Right? Steel manning means, okay, give me your best shot. What's your best argument? Let's make the best case. The best case is that violence is caused by religion. This is your argument. Let's go now to see who caused more violence. People who are religious and people who are not religious. There's a book here by Naveed Sheikh, University of Louisville. It's called Body Count, a quantitative review of political violence across world civilizations. Naveed S. Sheikh, University of Louisville. The book is called Body Count. Okay, you can get a PDF. He has a tally of all violence in history, man, and who did cause the most. So let's check the first one. Number 1, World War II. How much estimated killing? 55 million to 72 million. Again, it's an estimate, but Allahu Alam how many. They say roughly 55 to 72, some say even more. What was it? A war? Who caused it or who was involved in it? Christians and Buddhists. Right? Because people are going to come and say, well, what was the Aqeedah? Someone will say, Hitler was an atheist. Okay, sure. He was a Catholic. Okay. But what about his body's talent? See that? So when you bring Hitler, they say, no, Hitler wasn't even, he was not atheist. Well, tell them, okay, we're not going to argue that. Right? There's a book, Hitler's Library. He's had many ideas, right? He has a very strange character. Okay, let's go to his buddy over there, Stalin, who has a higher body count, 20 million. 20 million people. He's a clear atheist, communist. Pol Pot over there, right? The guy in Cambodia. And how about, you can't hide from this. You can't hide. You put them all together. What is going on here? Secondly, World War II was fighting what? Hate ideology. So even if we say they were Christians, some of them, the ideology was hate ideology. It had nothing to do with faith. That's the biggest death toll in the history of mankind known, recorded, guys. Right? If you go down Islam, what are you going to get? It's not even there, like way down there. And this is important evidence because the person who believes that, we have to ask him, قُلْ هَاتُ بُرْهَانَكُمْ كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. This is actually law. So even from that angle, steel man the argument. Say, okay, religion caused violence, right? How come we have such a low death toll compared to non-religious practices? Even after the 9/11, so much of war is done in the name of democracy and freedom, and the war on terror, which killed so many people. So that's another one. Contemporaries, you can compare that. But body count has all the numbers. Go there if you want to get some more data. And in comparison, brothers and sisters, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in all his battles he fought, the 20 plus battles, he killed only, according to Sheikh Salih Sindi, he mentioned this point, Tabaqat Sa'ad, if you look at all the death toll, 1,000 something. That's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 20 something battles, only 1,000 something. And someone's going to come and say, very religious. According to the Old Testament, they say Moses killed 10,000 people one day, one battle. SubhanAllah. First of all, that's questionable, Wallahu alam, right? But then here, you never hear someone associating the two, right? Someone's going to come and say, Nabi Sallallahu was violent. How did you get there? See, we have to understand the merit of someone's argument. What is he reading? What did he read? He didn't read nothing, that person. That person, you can tell he's not in the Maidan ilm. Right? The guy's in the tariqah. Right? Someone like that in the suq, you deal with him like that. And tell him, well, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if he was the number one killer, right? He didn't reach those top guys. According to your logic, he should be above the top guys. But what's more interesting, if you ask him, how many did he kill? He'd be like, oh, and he's going to make up some random number, right? That's why it's good to have that. There's a clip on YouTube, Sheikh Salih Sindi mentions the fa'idah. Tabaqat ibn Sa'ad, he mentions, he collected all numbers, put it together, 1,000 something. And those people who had fought bil-haqq, in a war, just war. We're not talking about Nabi killing innocent people, we're talking about combatants. But ma barak, what do you think, brothers and sisters, of those who were innocent? Nabi never did. Believers don't kill innocent people, illa bihaqq, right? Only those people who are, Allah has legislated. It means Islam, there's no such thing as killing innocent people, aslan. Okay, let's move now to other arguments that we can bring So we looked at the numbers for a second, we looked at some comparison there. We can just think about the new atheist. When he's making this claim, it's really not really based on history. It's based on quote mining and misquoting religion. So obviously the time is not much, but Dr. Abdul, he mentioned a lot of evidences to show how sloppy the discussion is of the atheist. That's another problem. The atheists are not rigor, right? They don't have an intellectual rigor. Their work is full of lies, propaganda, and misquotations or no quotations, just claims. So when someone makes a claim, then we have to just say, well, claims like this should not be taken because you're just making claims. So a lot of the stuff that they did mention, if you follow it, is lies, misquoting. And what they'll do first is they try to use the Old and New Testament to build a case, then they just put Islam together. So a second fallacy they fall into is they do qiyas ma'fariq. Islam is not Christianity, Judaism. It's not, right? So we have to understand that what they'll do is they'll mention some verses which are problematic in the Old and New Testament, which again, we believe that these are temperaments, right? These could be like, again, inventions. And they'll say, well, Islam likewise. What? Where's the footnotes? Where's the explanation? Because guilty by association, all Abrahamic faiths, no, Islam is the haqq. So we're going to say that this is not correct. That's another problem. We say, where's your proof? And they'll be like, oh, we don't have anything. So show us in the Quran. Show us in the hadith. And if they say, okay, there is, then we'll turn our attention to that topic. But when they make general claims, we just have to ask for general proofs. Okay, how many religious wars? How many people died? So when someone doesn't have evidence, you already know, brother and sister, it's an emotional argument. But let's talk about their argument, because Christopher Hitchens, he has something called the Hitchens razor. Right? They have cool names for bad principles. Right, brothers? They make good fancy names for bad principles. So Hitchens razor, we're going to use it to go back at him. What can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. Khalas, his whole kitab is without evidence. We use his razor. Razor goes two ways, cuts two ways, right? So he makes claims about Islam dun dalil, so you just reject it. You don't even need dalil, right? Because what did he make? What claims did he make? It's not a dalil. Qul hatu burhanakum, he has nothing. So when they say Islam is just, where's the proof? Where is it? Nothing. Even you see, they resort either to lying or they just put Islam at the tail end of the arguments. Why? Qiyas ma'fariq. They think Islam is like Christianity. If you ask them, did you read the Quran? No. Hadith? No. Tafsir? You can't read Arabic? What are you doing then? And this is actually one thing that most atheists have been clear about. New atheists are notorious for their ignorance of religion. Notorious. So much so they don't know anything about the basic religion. And if you want proof, we had more time, we'll show you how blatant their lies are. So, even if we look at all the stuff that they argue, we don't have to entertain it because we'll just use Hitchens' razor. He made baseless claims, so we reject it quickly. And say, well, he didn't bring a proof. Here, I'm bringing you a book, the body count, here's the facts. What do you have? Nothing? Okay. And this is a good way to deal with people who are emotional. Instead of arguing with them, don't scoop, go down to their level. Just say, 1 second. In Islam, we have to bring proofs. Here's Allah says in the Quran, bring proof if you're truthful. Okay, here's my proof. And how about you? Because he's making the claim that all religions, specifically Islam, because remember, they're writing after September 11, so this is their biggest argument. So much so that Sam Harris argued that the Muslims should be nuked. Imagine, this is the kind of person there. This is his argument. And they support the war in Iraq, these people, they're on record. So you have to understand such people, what do we think? And what's their proof? Nothing. So how do we explain to them Islam is not violent? And we tell them, okay, now that you have no real argument and you want to implicate Islam, let's talk about Islam. Because we are Muslims, we know our religion best. But let's start talking about some basics. Islam and Muslims are very much a signal or evidence of low crime rate. So Stephen Fish is a professor at University of California, Berkeley. He has a book. It's called 2011, Are Muslims Distinctive? A Look at the Evidence, Oxford University Press. Stephen Fish, Are Muslims Distinctive? 2011. He says in there that the percentage of society that's made up of Muslims is an extraordinary good predictor of a country's murder rate. More authoritarianism in a Muslim country does not account for difference. I have found that controlling for political regime in statistical analysis does not change the findings. More Muslims, less homicide. It's a kafir, he wrote that with us. Stephen Fish, 2011, Are Muslims distinct? The answer is yes. More Muslims, less homicide. Today, there's a big discussion in America about the culture wars, right? And some of them are saying, well, what did Muslims do for the West? They have this big discussions, right? Well, what did these immigrants do? More Muslims, less homicide. What do you mean? Muslims are known for this. We don't kill each other, but we also protect our people, and the people are in neighborhoods. So this is a non-Muslim professor saying that. Another one, Stephen Fish, page 44, same book. Muslim countries on average, 2.4 murders per year per 100,000 per 10,000 per 100,000 people. 2.4 murders per year per 100 people, compared to 7.5 in non-Muslim countries. Again, all non-Muslim countries. 2.4 per 100,000 people per annum versus 7.5 in non-Muslim countries. Again, we're not talking America, right? America is unique, right? That's all non-Muslim countries. So 2.5, 4 versus 7.5. Then, if you add the point further, it should argue, according to them, that the more religious you are, more violent you should become. Sah? That's the argument. Medina is rated recently the most safe city in the world. There's nobody, people are the most religious people in the world. Shouldn't they be the most violent? This is where Islam came from. Safest place in the world for this. How is it possible? I thought there were murderers everywhere. La ilaha illallah. Brothers, today people are moving to Dubai for safety and security. No one touches your phone, forget about your family. And someone's going to say, Islam is dangerous. Where do you live again? Right? It's very funny, right? SubhanAllah. Just like the hijab is oppressive to who? Right? Who gets catcalled in niqab and jilbab? I never seen that before. I only see people get catcalled in the West. This is proven. You can research that too. Catcalling is a big problem in the West. There's no solution except the women cover up. You can research it. That's the solution. We tell them like sabah al khair. Right? They're learning stuff they didn't know about this. طيب. Let's talk about Islam violence. We finish. Now, someone may say, well, wait, I have evidence. And we're going to say, what is it? That Islam is spread by the sword. This is where they're going to take the argument. This is what they're going to try to do. Islam is spread by the sword. And we have to be sophisticated in our answer to this, because the answer has to be properly given. So the answer we should not give is deny it by denying all battles. So if someone says, never have happened, it's like, maybe someone fought people, right? It's the battles. So that's already a mistake. That's what some people go there. They go say, there was never, Islam didn't violence. You're missing the point. It said spread by the violence sword. We're not talking about just war. We're talking about coercion, forcing people. That's haram. Absolutely Islam. La ikraha fi din. It's not allowed. So we're talking about what they're trying to argue is Islam's primary source of spreading is coercion. Okay, and we know, based on history, that that's how the Catholic Church and Christians spread their faith. Not to mention today, democracy. Okay, I'm going to get to that's what we have to understand. Democracy didn't spread nowhere. The democracy and Western values spread organically. Right? Colonization, slavery, post-colonization, Cold War. There's no such thing. It's just someone became democratic. So before we go there, we must be careful of the bad response. Bad response is, well, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no violence. Because you're missing the mark. He's talking about what? Coercion, haram. No, we don't do that. At the same time, we don't say yes, because that's also not sophisticated. Because what is he trying to ask you? Is he talking about just wars, maybe some battle versus a battle you find in history? It's a big difference. So we have to ask a simple question. Okay, let's explain it step by step. Step number one. There's all doubt. Ibn Qayyim, he writes in Zayd Ma'ad, volume 1, page 178. Ibn Qayyim, he says, when he's talking about the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's sunnah and the khutbah, that the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to debate the ulama, do you hold a stick in the Jum'ah khutbah or not? There's a debate on it. It means at the end of the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was it holding a stick or no? But he says some people use a sword. And Ibn Qayyim said many ignorant people claim the Prophet held a sword during the khutbah, indicating that Islam spread by the sword. Ibn Qayyim saying this, Zayd Ma'ad. He said, this is a grave ignorance. The city of the Prophet, which he used to deliver the khutbahs, it was itself conquered by the Quran, not the sword. So this argument that some people have a sword, of course, again, I don't think I've seen that before, none of us have, but he said this is ignorance, because they're trying to say Islam spread the sword. It didn't. Because the Quran that came to Medina, which became Muslim city, from the Islam where it spread, it comes from what? By the Quran. Mujahidun bihi, jihad kabir. Fight with the greater jihad, ayat the Quran, bida'wah. So Ibn Qayyim Zayd Ma'ad shows you some people are claiming that. Number two, Islamically, the earliest people who would believe that the Quran would necessitate fighting, because we have to understand here, the Quran sanctions violence or war with certain conditions, parameters when needed, by Allah's permission, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so this is important, because if someone's asking how do you understand battles, we're talking just war theory, good research in philosophy. Just war theory is when is war allowed. Nobody who has any knowledge would deny such things. How can they? If they're living in America, right? They're right in the military-industrial complex. Right? So it's important to understand that. But we're saying now, does Islam say, as they say, Surah Tawbah says, kill them and find them? 1 second. Jabir ibn Abdullah is reported authentically. One day, Jabir ibn Abdullah says, Uthman sent 50 riders amongst us. Our leader was Muhammad bin Maslama. And when we arrived at the place where we were supposed to go, we met a man who had a mushaf hanging from his neck and a sword in his hands, and his eyes were tearing. And he said, verily this book, i.e. the Quran, commands me with this, yani the sword. So Muhammad Muslim, a Sahabi, he said to him, sit down. For verily we struck in the path of Allah according to the Quran and Sunnah, who are teaching the Quran before you were even born. And Muhammad continued to speak to him until he returned from his position. Pay attention. Who are those people? People who came after the Sahaba misunderstood the deen. That's not the Sahaba. So this man was saying, as the image the West to have, Quran and sword, right? Now you get it where it came from. Somebody who was wrong. And the Khawarij is the only one who do that, right? They're walking around with the sword in the Quran. Now some people, there's a rifle in the Quran saying, this is Islam. They don't understand that the violence itself is not the issue that their people are discussing only. Discussing that Islam calls to this. Which is the wasila, where is the ghaya, where is the goal, and what's the means? So now, if we understand where it came from, we can see that Islamically, there's no compulsion in religion. Surah Baqarah, ayat 56. So how can it be that Islam is innately violent if the Sahaba were showing, and Nabi showed it, this is not how we spread Islam? That's one. Number two, we showed them historical evidence of all the countries, cities that spread or became Muslim without any violence. According to their argument, Islam spread by the sword. It must be the only Islam spread by the sword. So we're going to ask them, Medina, Rasulullah, no sword. Yemen, no sword. Greater Syria, Bahrain, large portions of Africa, when the Sahaba came to Africa, the whole Malay archipelago, right, or the region of Indonesia, Malaysia, right, that whole region became Muslim without any fighting. So why we're seeing all this, these are examples of document evidence. So Medina, Yemen, right, so you can memorize them. Medina, Yemen, Sham, Bahrain, Africa, large portions of it, and the whole Malay region. Right? The Malay archipelago, right? The whole region. Indonesia. That's the easiest one to remember, right? Indonesia. That's it, good. So if the argument was Islam spreads by the sword only, or Marji, what happened here? Large Muslim society, 280 million people in the world is Indonesia, and all of them are Muslims, or most of them, sorry I should say. And how did they become Muslim? No violence. طيب. Continue. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam now, how do we respond to the argument? Okay, the Prophet fought. So they will say, especially Christians, but Rasul he fought people. He fought battles, 20 something, alright? And they will try to say, Jesus never fought nobody. I tell them, well, it depends which gospel you're reading, first of all. I don't know if you're really aware of this. We tell them, as for us, Isa and Maryam, he's not dead, he's coming back, and he's going to fight the Dajjal. You also believe that, right? Antichrist. And number two, according to which gospel you're reading? Gospel of Luke. What does Jesus say in there? Supposedly, bring my enemies in front of me and kill them. I came with the sword, not peace. And you guys know that, right? Gospel of Luke is for the people who want to fight, and the people who don't want to go Gospel of John. These people, guys, rather imagine. So when they ask you Gospel of John, I say, wait, how about the Gospel of Luke? Let's read some of these. And it's so funny because same kitab. Because Allah says in the Quran, they don't read the book, right? And it's also important. That's like us as Muslims. It's shameful if someone says in the Quran, and us as Muslims, someone says in the Quran, we say where? If you ask the Christian, it's in the Quran, he's going to be like, the Bible, he'll be like, he doesn't know. So that's important. Muslims have to also know what they might say, so you can research those kind of misquoted verses. But let's explain now how the Rasul's battles are not evidence of spreading by sword. Ibn Abbas, Hadith Muslim, Imam Ahmed, Sahih, Shaykh al-Muqbil al-Wadi'i, authenticating Jami' Sahih, volume 6, page 92. قال Ibn Abbas, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not fight any people, except he gave them da'wah to Islam first. Pay attention. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not fight any people, except he invited them to Islam first. Hadith, Muslim, Ahmed, Hadith Ibn Abbas, Sahih. This shows you, always Islam, and after they rejected Islam came the option of the jizya, after that came the just war. So therefore, Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, he mentions that the fighting that every time Rasulullah happened or did, and in Islam is a wasila, laysa ghaya. وَجَاهِدُهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادٍ كَبِيرًا. By Islam, we do da'wah with our minds and tongues. We don't fight the people. That's not accepted anyways. Because what is the condition of shahada? Sidq wal yaqeen. So what kind of sidq and yaqeen is this? No nifaq, right? Someone says, La ilaha illallah, he's scared for his life. They tell him, this person is a Muslim. What is this kind of da'wah anyways? But pay attention how Ibn Abbas mentioned that. On the practical evidence, someone say, what's the proof of Ibn Abbas? Hadith Muslim Ali, when he sent him to the Battle of Khaybar. He sent him. Nabi said Ali other places, and he spread Islam to the people, and they accepted numerous times. Imam Shawkani says in Nail Awtar, volume 7, page 262, in this hadith is evidence of the obligation when giving da'wah to disbelievers prior to engaging in military conflict. I have a question about Western tradition. They don't do that. So why are they talking about Islam when they have a long track record? Starting from where? Slavery, colonization, post-colonization, Cold War, brother, still today. Right? The spread of violence is always happening. By force, they force people into their faith tradition. They force people into the secular mindset. And to show you something now, once we understand this, we have to now finish by being mature and saying, Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah Majmu' Fatawa, volume 28, page 263, and Imam Ibn Qayyim is Kitab Furusiyya, page 18. And also British historian, one of the most authoritative Orientalist Islamic historians, Hugh Kennedy. He also agrees that Islam is spread with the sword, not by the sword. Pay attention to the wording. With, not by. Hugh Kennedy, guys, is a big guy in history, right? He's Orientalist and non-Muslim, and he's a fair-minded. He says, was Islam spread by the sword? Page 9. Islam was not spread by the sword, but without the sword, it would not have spread. That's the same argument Taymiyyah ibn Qayyim say. Right. Because there's a just battle, then there's the da'wah. The main da'wah of Islam was arguments, spreading the haqq, good akhlaq, and then there's the people who Islam tells us, after all those measures I mentioned, where defending your borders and also defending the deen. And some might say, but why is there violence aslan? Why is there even violence? We're going to answer, who allowed that? Allah. And there with the conditions. We're not talking about today, someone just coming and violent. We're talking about the proper condition. What do you amr? Just cause, has to be for Allah's sake, has to be no innocent people killed. All these measures. In today's time, though, we can see right in front of us as the genocide is unfolding. Who can talk about just war in today's era, brothers and sisters? Human Rights Council has failed the world. So many murders, so many innocent people killed. Yet, people today are turning a blind eye. In Islam, there's a whole theory, just theory of war theory. But look how Hugh Kennedy is a respected historian, how he mentioned this point. Imam Ibn Qayyim before him, they mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah the same. We understand that. With versus by. But now, that explains the battles. But someone might say, well, then you're kind of saying the same things in different ways. Not really. Because democracy has a long history of warfare as well. The person who's making the argument is pretending like their governments don't do war. Can anyone who's in America even deny that? American military budget is almost $1 trillion, brothers, 800 something billion. The biggest in the world, imagine. That's the net value, half the value of Amazon or Apple per year America spends. Trump was trying to raise $1 trillion. They're in this. So here's an article you can read. Democracy and Violence, a theoretical overview. And in there they argue even democracy spreads with violence. Which ideology wasn't defended or pushed without some violence? And this is an important point. Mankind by nature does that. So the question we must understand, when they say why Islam is violent, they're also trying to say the others are not wrong. Are you saying that violence is not allowed altogether? Or are you saying terrorism is haram? Killing innocent people is haram. Coercion deen is haram. What are you arguing about? Are you talking about just war? Just war exists everywhere. But they also, you guys have a history, other traditions of no just war. So the argument then will be democracy spread peacefully and Islam spread with the sword. And it's further from the truth, brothers and sisters. The opposite. It's actually democracy spread by violence and Islam spread by da'wah and then some by just war. So there's a response Islamically. So if someone is patient, you bring them all those adillah and then you tell them, now tell me about the ayah in Surah Tawbah. Now it makes sense. So then they'll be like, oh yeah, but it says in the Quran. We tell them, brother or sir, if you're reading the Quran, we do the tafsir, not in Arabic language. You don't. So we're gonna read. فَقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ, kill the polytheists. حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُمْ ضَمِيرْ يَعُودُ لِمَنْ. Where does the Damir go back to? Mushrikeen. Who are Mushrikeen? Quraysh. Hadith ibn Umar. قَاتِلُ أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أُقَاتِلِ النَّاسِ. Men. Quraysh. See, when they go there, we tell them where you're going. You want to run to the hadith? What does Nas mean? It means Quraysh. Otherwise, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he didn't fight anyone else like that. He didn't fight other people. Fought Quraysh. Go here. Allah talks about the Quraysh. Go keep going to surah. The context is clear. Asbab al-Nuzul, wa tafsir, wa shuruh al-hadith, this is our expertise. We don't need someone come and cherry pick. We tell them it's not the Bible, brother. This is hermeneutics. You have it too. Interpretation skills. But brothers and sisters, why am I saying this? Someone who comes with this argument, first thing you have to know his level. It's an emotional appeal. That which is coming emotional, don't get angry. It's miskeen, yani. If we had anything, we would have brought you something better. So we have to tell him, like, I think you think religion is violent? Maybe we should do a comparison. Okay, how about this? They did a statistical analysis. The New Testament and Old Testament. The New Testament mentions violence 2.8% of the book. The Quran mentions any type of fighting 2.1%. And the Old Testament mentions fighting 5.3%. Yet someone's going to come and say Islam is violent. Suicide bombing. The first one to do wasn't a Muslim. In America, the first suicide bomb ever occurred was by the mafia in 1920s. They killed the horse and carriage. It's very important. As if like Muslims today, if they're using it, let's be honest, who's the first to condemn the Khawarij? Muslimin. And who's the first to police its ideologies? Us. So if they come and say, well, look what happened September 11th, we tell them those Khawarij. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. Before they attribute that September 11th, before it was done by Sam Badana's Jama'ah who are supporting this, what did they do in Kenya? What did they do in Riyadh? They bombed the Muslims before them. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he tell them? The Khawarij, يَقْتُلُونَ أَهْلَ الْإِسْلَامِ وَيَتْرُكُونَ أَهْلَ الْأَوْثَانِ. Someone's going to come and tell us, well, look at this. It's like, they did it here too. They killed Muslimin. They were deemed by our scholars, those are Khawarij. Those are deviants. Kilabun nar, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. And someone might come and say, and that's another thing, using extremists and afrad as a representation of a deen is not academic, aslan. So someone come and say, look at this guy. This guy represents Islam. No, the same way George Bush doesn't. The same way the Oklahoma bomb in 1995 doesn't. The biggest terrorist attack in America is the Oklahoma bomb in 1995. Dr. Salih Salih, rahimahullah, he has a book in English, Oklahoma bombing, discussion. 95, that's the biggest homegrown one. This is a white guy, white terror extremist. And I'm saying this because it shows you the nature of extremism have nothing to do with religion. Extremism, according to experts, is connected to, and terrorism to political agenda. So when you put all these pieces together, it becomes clear. So if someone uses history, then you bring back historical evidence. Someone misquotes the Quran Sunnah, you bring the Jawab you mentioned, the Habib Abbas and others. If someone now is trying to claim still, we tell them then there's nothing left really, because the argument itself is folding, which leads to the final point I'm going to make, which is that really this is a part of a bigger discussion, which is Islam or religion, does it benefit society or not? So one of the ways atheists try to make that claim is say, well, violence is innate in religion. We debunked that today. But now they will say, okay, fine. But how about the economics of the country? Didn't Machiavelli also mention that? And this we'll have to take next week. But to get you to understand this point, atheists, especially secularists, they try to argue that secular societies are better than religious societies because they produce a higher quality of life. And many Muslims believe this nonsense, unfortunately. That they take a look at the situation of Muslim Ummah or across the world as indication of the higher teachings or the higher objectives of the deen. You need to differentiate between Islam and Muslimin. Right? So if a Muslim state is falling short, let's say, in particular practices, it doesn't mean Islam is. The same way the Western attribution to their success has nothing to do with democracy and secularism. It has to do with their other things. So I'm going to address this later, but there's people like Phil Zuckerman, very famous atheist, who writes about this, and he tries to make these cases, and these are still talking points of many atheists until today, that even if we argue that religion didn't cause a lot of violence, religion causes more harms than benefits. That's the argument. Fasid and masalih. It's more fasid. With time, not so fast. That's incorrect. And the only way we can answer this, we have to do it next week, we have to take a deep discussion on this, is that we must analyze deeply the benefits of religion and the harms of non-religion. To give you just some ideas, right, because it requires more unpacking, but just some basic ideas. What are the masalih of the deen, or any deen, especially Islam? And it's important because when you talk to people who are not so religious, they take it to you, what am I missing? And they say, well, that's a very odd way of discussing, right? Because that's what they think. They think, well, what do you have I don't? Well, we're telling them, first of all, you don't have hayat tayyibah, you don't have a good life, period. Allah already promised those who believe and do good deeds, hayat tayyibah, they're going to get a good life. You don't have that. That's because it's mashrut. Allah put the shart of sa'adah, happiness, to deen. Inna ladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. So the problem they're going to have is that they're going to say, okay, so show me. And this is a bigger discussion, and we have to talk about it next week in terms of economics and politics, particularly economics. But to help us understand that the atheist, because he's living in such luxuries from Allah, he feels now protected, he feels comfortable, and he thinks that religion has no benefit, or its benefit is not needed because whatever benefit it has, he already has achieved whatever he has. Again, ironically, forgetting Allah gave it to him. So the nature of mankind is that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them more dunya as a test. Example, Fir'aun, the earliest atheist who said that Fir'aun was rich. Right? It's no coincidence. Affluism, wealth, is connected to atheism. Because Fir'aun has a lot of money, right? A lot of wealth. And he's using it to misguide the people. So we're going to show that's one of the tricks that they fall into. Allah tells us, وَلَا تُعْجِبُكَ أَمْوَالُهُمْ وَأَوْلَادُهُمْ. Don't be amazed by their children and wealth. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَنْ يُعَذِّبُهُمْ بِهَا فِي الدُّنْيَا. Allah only wants to punish them by way of in the dunya. Pay attention, the tafsir. وَتَزْهَقَ أَنفُسُهُمْ كَافِرُونَ. Take the lives of the disbelievers. Surah Tawbah, ayah 85. Someone may say, well, what does that mean then? It means that just because they have the material wealth, let's say good economies, good standard of living, they're not in happiness. There's a disconnect between happiness and high material life. And the proof of it is that atheists have the highest level of suicide. That doesn't make sense. How is suicidality goes up with affluence? Why? And so to understand this, Phil Zuckerman, he tries to hide these, he tries to downplay these points. But just to understand how deep the bias is, go to the Human Development Index, HDI. You check it yourself. Check the top countries and check with Muslim countries. I have a question. HDI doesn't measure suicidality. Why? I mean, if we have a good life, you shouldn't be killing yourself, right? You should be alive to have a good life, right? But here we are, no measure of that. Talking about this water quality and education quality. How about life? We're alive. They're killing themselves because something's wrong. That's one. It's very important. And they admit it. Even he admits it. Yes, suicide rates are very high in secular societies. Before they used to say that it was a theist's fault. They're bullying us into this. It's like now they are the big majority and they're still dying. So what are the masalih of the deen? Quickly. Number one, religion makes you happier. 2010 study, Journal American Societal Review, and also 2019 study in Germany found that Muslims specifically are the happiest people in the world. Right? Self-reported, guys. Self-reported studies. You can just lie. Right? And people still say they're happy. Right? So religion makes you happy. Number two, protects against depression. Depressive symptoms. Journal of Clinical Psychology 2010 the study. 2010, University of Scarborough. They found a study that thinking of God helps reduce anxiety associated with making mistakes. However, the finding only holds for people who believe in God. Because Allah forgives, right? So you feel better. Right? If you don't believe Allah forgives, then your mistake is your fault. You screw up. So if you're the problem, then the solution is get yourself out of here. See, brothers? If I'm the problem, khalas, that's the solution. But if I say the problem is I made a mistake, Allah forgives, Allah will help me. Another one they found. Religious participation by kids has been shown to result in less juvenile delinquency, less drug use, less smoking, better school attendance, etc. Right? These are all books-wise references for this. 2017, Michigan State University found religious participation is linked to lower suicide rates in many parts of the world, including the United States and Russia. Right? So we also found that. How about religious rights or religious and ethical rights are based on religious teachings? That's the part Zuckerberg we're going to talk about next week. If atheist secularists say that we don't need religion, yeah, because you're taking their values. They're standing on the shoulders of a long historical Christian tradition. Then, when they reach the top, the true religion say, we're good to go. Well, it doesn't make sense. You didn't start from the bottom. So it's like saying right now, and we'll discuss it later, most of the values that Islam teaches, the Christians or the secularists are doing. For example, economically, if we find comparison, we find Islam teaches us this, they're doing it, so they're getting success, and maybe we're not doing it. That's another thing. So when we look at these things, we can see that religion has many benefits. Protective benefits for health, protective benefits for your state of quality of life. It helps you against low levels of mental health or suicide. It also helps with social cohesion. Religious people have the stronger communities. Religious people have brotherhood, community. Atheists and most secular societies are highly lonely. Right? So much so they have the Ministry of Loneliness. In the UK and Japan. They go, imagine Japan, you can rent a friend. You can rent someone to walk around with you. Just to be like, not lonely. It'd be good money too. And you're telling them, subhanAllah, Islam, I'm incentivized by Allah. You see, brothers and sisters, we have to understand something. Islam, the Jama'ah has a powerful effect. Just Salatu Jama'ah, forget about anything else. Jum'ah, Mu'eed, Salatu Jama'ah, just to catch up with one another. It's one of the maqasid of the deen, to jammu' al-nas. Jum'ah, Jama'ah. Ijtimaa. There's Jum'ah is for the Ijtimaa. Hence the ulama, they say that when you miss the first Jum'ah, there shouldn't be a second. Because the maslahah of combining people will be spread. That's Islam. And they ask some people, when you guys get together? Once a year? If best? Sakin, yani. And the atheists, they know that. So that's why some of them, they got together, they made an atheist church. The Church of Satan, there's the Church of Atheism. We get together on Christmas and they just, I don't know what they do, but they just feel good about themselves. Because they don't have that. And they don't believe in the khair. So there's no, so you can see those mafasid. You see, and no one knows, someone will know it who falls into it. So we'll talk about next week, how do we respond to those secular discussions? Because a lot of Muslims are also feeling that way, and their problem is coming from where? When you look at the Ummah, they're judging Islam by the Muslims. No, that's not how you do it. يعرف الحق تعرف الرجال. Know the truth, you know the men. Right? You don't know the truth by the men, right? You don't look and say, oh, this is Muslim, must be no good. This is Islam. And we're gonna show an example. So next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll take a look at that. For that is also very important. And then we'll try to summarize most of what we said so far in the series, inshallah. I think those are the major arguments. There are a few more, but we'll try to make them quicker because the major arguments we have taken already, inshallah ta'ala. And we have any quick questions, inshallah, we'll take it before the salah. Yes. Exactly, yeah. So they use the hadith in Muslim Ahmed, Hadith Umar, others that have been sent before they did with the sword. So we tell them, what does that mean? Is it a wasila or is it the ghaya? It's a means to establish the truth for those who are arrogant or stubborn. So we understand that, as we mentioned, we don't negate warfare altogether. We argue for just war. But when is war being used? At the end of all other types of da'wah. What they're trying to say is that Islam spread by the sword. We're not arguing with the sword, we don't deny that. We're denying that you're arguing that this is how we spread Islam. So every time they quote something, we tell them, if that was correct, then Nabi Sallallahu should have killed more people. He should be fighting more people. I just say he didn't hit anyone, man or woman or slave, except in battle. Why is it that he's so gentle and only in battle we find him fighting against his enemies? So we tell them those are hadith in that context. Otherwise, you can tell them, if this was truth, let's just take it as they say, then how do we harmonize all the other stuff? All the other things the Muslim said, the Quran tells us to forgive and to pardon. So how do we understand that? Right? So they'll be like, well, like they're gonna, again, they don't have principles, but what they'll try to do, and this is what they do, they take one evidence and they try to abrogate everything else. For example, they also say the ayah to save. Ayah to save did not abrogate all verses. This is wrong. Okay? How many abrogated verses in the Quran? We studied it. Some up to maximum 10. The ulama say, ala sahih, only 10. So when some ulama mention 300, 400 verses abrogated by one verse, no, it's not correct. That's not the correct opinion. So they'll say ayah to save means Islam came and then with sword, abrogate all forgiveness. No, this is wrong Islamically. So that's another thing we have to understand this. So we tell them every hadith they mention, it goes against the principles we mentioned. Nabi didn't fight people till he bring da'wah. Why was he fighting them? That's why, again, Islam, these are not the ghayat. Right? It's a wasila, but when is it also? How was it done? That's another thing. So some may say, okay, Nabi Sallallahu when he was engaged in war. So we asked him, so what was his war? Today, in the Western world, the violation of human rights, all the Geneva Convention, all violations today, from people who are propagating the high values. That's the greatest of contradictions. So if someone today will come and say, well, Islam did this, and do you understand what Islamic warfare even means? It's a very deep topic. But we understand right in front of us, the genocide has happened, yet people can't even accept it. So therefore, we as Muslims understand that even you guys, according to your own standards, are not following it. Forget about talking about our religion. But we also have that benefit, we said, like Hugh Kennedy said, by versus with. We have to understand that point. Because anytime they try to bring you hadith, just say, is it by the sword or with the sword? And how and what degree and how many? So, the kuffar, they have a bad saying, right? The devil's in the details. No. We say the opposite. The haqq is in the details. Right? When they bring you ijmal, you bring tafsir. It's a qaida always. Anyone who brings you ijmalat, right? But you bring like generalities, just know he's jahil or he's a deviant. So we say al-ijmal yurith al-ishkal. وتفسير يبين السبيل. Right? That's the qaida. Al-ijmal yurith al-ishkal. Generalities creates problems. وتفسير in detail clears the path. That's very important because someone's going to bring, Nabi Sallallahu did one. You don't even know what the hadith got it from. He just one, and we tell him just one. This is what you found. How about all this? And remember, brothers and sisters, when someone is being emotional, one dalil is supposed to be enough. When someone is emotional, one fake news is enough. Right? Someone's emotional, he just has fake news. Doesn't he have a dalil? That's how sad it is. So when someone goes there, just remember what you have to do. Don't be emotional though. That's what we have to be careful of because sometimes people get angry and then they propagate what he's saying. So for example, I mentioned before the story. We're going to finish with it. Ibn Qayyim Kitab Hidayah al-Hiyara. In the Muqaddimah, he mentions why he wrote the kitab. One dhimmi, he asked one of the Muslims about a question in Islam. He said, Jahil, dhimmi. So he answered, he gave him jawab kafi. Boom! He punched him. Ibn Qayyim was so shocked. He heard that. He said, La ilaha illallah. Imagine, a dhimmi has protected rights in Islam. He was so ignorant, the one job he gave, he just punched him. They took him out. That's what's happening today. Someone comes and says, Islam says, oh yeah. Then he does exactly what he said. He said, Islam's violent, you just body slammed him. What the hell is that? He said, da'wah. That's what he was telling you you're going to do. La ilaha illallah. So today we have to explain to people, don't become like this. So Ibn Qayyim wrote the whole kitab just to explain. This is not how you do da'wah. Also, this is how he's supposed to explain it. Because he was so disturbed by that incident. But also today, brothers, we have to understand a lot of lay people, they have to know this. So inshallah, to get those resources, barakallahu feekum, subhanaka bihamdika.